She stole from this family. Take her away. That was my mother's voice, steady and rehearsed. As two officers walked through the front door of the home my wife and I had just bought together. The housewarming cake was still on the counter. Camille's hands were still dusted with powdered sugar from cutting it. My name is Ryan Calloway. I'm 32 years old. And watching my wife get handcuffed in our own living room, in front of 30 guests, while my family stood in a neat little row and watched, that was the moment I understood what they had always been. Let me take you back 2 hours. We had saved for 3 years for that house. A 4-bedroom in Rosewood Hills, the kind of neighborhood Camille had grown up driving past and dreaming about. Nothing extravagant, but it was ours, our names on the deed, our mortgage, our Sunday mornings and arguments about paint colors. My mother had made comments from the beginning. You're moving so far from us. That neighborhood is a stretch for your budget. You sure Camille is handling the finances, right? She had said that last one at Easter dinner, loud enough for the whole table to hear, and then laughed it off like it was a joke. I should have seen it then. I didn't. The housewarming was packed. Camille had planned everything herself: catered appetizers, a playlist she spent 2 weeks building, a photo wall near the staircase with pictures of the two of us from the past 4 years. My family showed up 40 minutes late. My mother kissed my cheek and handed me a bottle of wine she'd clearly grabbed from her own pantry, the dust still on the label. My father shook my hand and spent most of the evening talking to my brother near the garage door. My brother Marcus barely looked at Camille. He had never liked her. I had always written it off as his personality. About 90 minutes in, I was in the kitchen when I heard Camille's friend Derek come up behind me. Derek had been Camille's college study partner, now a forensic accountant at a firm downtown. He had been invited specifically because Camille wanted people she trusted around her on that day. She'd had a feeling, one she hadn't wanted to name out loud. I remember thinking that was sweet. Overcautious, maybe? I was wrong about the overcautious part. My mother's voice cut through the music first. I want everyone to hear this. I need everyone to hear this. I stepped into the living room and she was standing in the center of it, phone already in her hand, 2 officers behind her. Not called in the moment. Prearranged. The kind of thing you coordinate in advance. She stole from this family. My mother said again, and this time she was looking directly at Camille. She forged Ryan's signature on the property deed. She redirected funds from the Calloway family trust to cover the down payment on this house. She has been stealing from us for over a year. Camille went white. She set down her glass of sparkling water so carefully it barely made a sound. Mom, what are you doing? I said. One of the officers stepped forward. We have a warrant for the arrest of Camille Rios Calloway on charges of fraud and forgery. Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us. This is insane, Camille said quietly. I've never touched the family trust. Ryan, I've never even seen those documents. She's lying, my mother said. We have digital records. I looked at my father. He was studying the floor. I looked at my brother. Arms crossed. Jaw set. Already decided. Not one of them said a word. I moved toward Camille and one of the officers put a hand up. Sir, please stand back. And then they put the handcuffs on her. In our living room. In front of her friends and my family and the catering staff and the half-eaten housewarming cake on the counter. And the expression on Camille's face as they led her past me, it wasn't panic. It wasn't anger. It was something quieter and much harder to look at. It was the face of a person realizing they had always been a target. My mother watched them walk her out. Then she straightened her blazer, picked up a canapé from the nearest tray, and said to the room, I'm sorry you all had to see that. I didn't say anything. I didn't shout or beg or demand explanations. I just looked at her for a long moment, made sure I had memorized exactly what her face looked like in that second, and then I went to find Derek. He was already by the window with his phone out. I think I know what just happened, he said before I could speak. Tell me, I said. He looked up. But first I need to look at everything. We worked through the night at Derek's apartment. I gave him every login I had: personal accounts, the joint account Camille and I shared, the property records, the title company emails. Derek knew how to read the kind of financial trail that looked clean on the surface and wasn't. By 3 a.m. he had it. The Calloway family trust had in fact been losing money, not dramatically. Not all at once, but steadily over about 18 months. Small transfers, rerouted disbursements, a pattern that looked like normal administrative variance unless you knew what to look for. Derek knew what to look for. And the transfers didn't point to Camille. They pointed to an account registered to a property management LLC formed 14 months ago. A company with no website, no employees, no physical address. A company registered using my brother's old business address but structured so that his name appeared nowhere on the current filing. Derek sat back in his chair. Your brother set up the shell company, he said. But your mother authorized the transfers. She has signatory authority on the trust. They were draining it, I said slowly. Looks like close to 200,000 over 18 months, Derek said. And when it got to a point where someone might eventually notice, they needed someone to blame. They needed Camille, I said. He nodded. And with the warrant already executed, even if the charges don't stick, it's her name that's been dragged through this. Your family walks away. She carries it. I sat with that for a long moment. The carefully chosen party date. The officers who arrived too quickly, too prepared. The way my mother had said, I want everyone to hear this before the room had even settled. None of it had been impulsive. All of it had been staged. And the house itself was the perfect crime scene because our down payment was legitimate, documented, traceable to our joint savings account. But if my family said otherwise loudly enough, in front of enough witnesses, in front of law enforcement, the narrative would exist regardless of the facts. That was the thing about my family. They understood optics. They had spent 40 years building a reputation on optics. I reached out to a defense attorney before sunrise. Not a family friend. Not anyone. My parents had ever met a woman named Patricia Wells, referral from Derek, who had spent 15 years doing exactly this kind of case. She answered on the second ring. By morning, Camille was out. No bail required once Patricia presented the initial counter documentation. The DA's office took one look at the actual financial trail and the charges were suspended pending investigation. I went to pick her up from the processing center. She walked out in yesterday's clothes, the same blouse she'd been wearing at our party. She looked exhausted. She looked like someone who had just learned something about the world that couldn't be unlearned. I'm so sorry, I said. She shook her head. You didn't do this. No, I said. But I'm going to finish it. She looked at me for a moment. Then she took my hand and said, I know. I gave Patricia everything Derek had compiled. She filed a motion to dismiss all charges against Camille within 48 hours. Then she filed a civil complaint against my mother and the trust management structure for fraud and misappropriation. Derek prepared a full forensic report, 73 pages. Documented to the last decimal point, and we sent a copy to the state attorney's office. I also requested a formal audit of the Callaway Trust through the estate court, which put the entire structure under judicial review. My mother's ability to make any further transfers was frozen the same day. Then I called my father. He picked up on the first ring, which told me he had been waiting for me to call. That detail alone made me angrier than almost anything else. We need to talk about what happened, he said carefully. No, I said. I need you to listen. The trust is under audit. The shell company has been traced. The state attorney has the forensic report. I've given you the courtesy of this call before it becomes a public matter, but I want you to understand there's nothing left to contain. Silence. Your brother was trying to protect the family, he said finally. He was stealing from it, I said. And Mom used my wife as a decoy. More silence. Then, quietly, she was never right for this family, Ryan. The clarity of it almost knocked the breath out of me. Not the cruelty I had expected that. The casualness. The way he said it, like it was simply a known fact, like the weather. She's my wife, I said. And she's better than everyone in that room, including me. I'll see you in court. I hung up. The next day, I walked into my brother's office. He worked at a financial consulting firm in the business district, a firm that, as it happened, had processed several of the transactions Derek had flagged. His assistant tried to stop me at the door. I kept walking. He looked up from his desk. His expression went from surprise to flat in about half a second. You're making a mistake, he said. I set a copy of the forensic report on his desk without a word. He didn't touch it. His eyes moved to mine. That shell company, I said, is connected to 3 clients of this firm. Which means this stops being a family matter and starts being a regulatory matter. The State Bar, the Financial Industry Oversight Board, your firm's compliance department. They'll all be receiving this report by end of business today. He leaned back slowly. You'd really do this to us. You did this, I said. You picked Camille because you thought she had no defenses. You thought because she didn't come from money, because she didn't have the right last name, she'd be easy to bury. You miscalculated. His jaw tightened. She married into our family. She doesn't belong here. There it was. The thing under all of it, not the money, not the trust. The simple, corrosive belief that Camille was less than, that she had entered a space she wasn't entitled to, and that removing her was, on some level, a correction. I picked up my copy of the report. I told him the same thing I told my father. I'll see you in court. His firm placed him on administrative leave by Friday. The compliance investigation opened the following Monday. 2 of their major clients requested account reviews. The firm's name appeared in a financial trade publication by the end of the week, not yet publicly tied to criminal activity, but the language was careful and specific enough that anyone who knew how to read it understood what was coming. My mother called 3 days after I'd been to his office. She didn't ask about Camille. She didn't ask about the charges or the investigation. She asked whether I had spoken to the estate court directly or whether it had gone through an attorney. "I've retained Patricia Wells," I said. A pause. "You're really doing this?" "You did this," I said, "same as I told my brother. Ryan, that house, that down payment, you should have come to the family first. We could have helped you. Instead, she convinced you to go off on your own, and now look at where we are." And there it was from her too. Camille as the wedge. Camille as the infection. The entire narrative my family had built that I had been pulled away from them by an outsider collapsed into 2 sentences. "Camille didn't convince me of anything," I said. "I chose her. I choose her every day. What you did at our home, in front of our friends, was not about money. It was about making sure she never felt safe." My mother's voice went quiet and controlled in a way that I now recognized as fury with a mask on. "I did what I had to do to protect this family's legacy. I told her what I'd told the others. Then I hung up." Patricia was thorough and fast. The civil complaint moved quickly once the forensic report was filed with the court. The estate audit confirmed the discrepancy: $187,000 in unauthorized transfers over 14 months. My mother's signatory access was formally suspended. My brother's connection to the shell company was documented and referred to the state attorney. And then something I hadn't anticipated happened. A former employee of my father's company reached out to Patricia directly. A woman who had been quietly let go 2 years ago after raising concerns about the trust's accounting. She had documentation. She had emails. She had been sitting on it, waiting, because she had no reason to believe anything would come of it. Now she had a reason. Her information expanded the scope significantly. What had looked like 18 months of misconduct turned out to have roots going back almost 4 years. My parents had been treating the family trust as a personal account, slow and careful. Never enough to trigger an audit in a single quarter, always restructured before the annual review. And when the balance had dropped far enough to eventually raise questions, they had needed an exit, someone whose name could be attached to the discrepancy. Someone without the family name, without the connections, without the standing to fight back convincingly. They had picked Camille the moment I introduced her at Thanksgiving 3 years ago. I sat with that for a long time. The idea that every cold comment, every pointed question, every moment of deliberate exclusion, it had all been infrastructure. Not personal cruelty for its own sake. Strategic erosion. They had been making sure she would be easy to isolate when the time came. I told Camille in our kitchen on a Sunday morning. I laid it out the same way Derek had laid it out for me: factual, sequential, no cushioning. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "They planned it before they even met me properly," she said. "Yes," I said. She looked down at her coffee. "I always felt it. That feeling of not being evaluated, exactly. Being assessed. Like I was a variable they were trying to account for." I nodded. She looked up. "How long before the criminal referral?" "Patricia thinks 60 to 90 days, I said. Camille nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. And then, after a pause, "Are you okay?" That was the thing about her that my family had never understood and never wanted to. She asked me that in the middle of everything: her arrest, her name in documents, her picture in Patricia's filing, and she asked whether I was okay. "I'm angry," I told her honestly. "But I know exactly what I'm doing and why." "That's enough." She reached across the counter and covered my hand with hers. "Then let's finish it." The criminal referral came 8 weeks later. My mother was formally charged with breach of fiduciary duty and misappropriation of trust assets. My brother faced charges of conspiracy and financial fraud. The charges were specific, documented, prosecutorial, not the kind of thing that gets quietly resolved over golf course conversations. My father was not charged initially, but he was named as a person of interest in the broader civil case. His financial licenses came under review. 3 of his long-standing business partners requested a formal audit of their shared accounts. I declined all media requests. Patricia handled the press through a single written statement. Derek prepared a public version of the forensic summary for the estate court filing, which became part of the public record. One headline got picked up by 2 regional outlets. Rosewood Hills family under investigation, son's forensic evidence exposes years of trust fraud. It was measured and factual. It didn't need to be sensational. The facts were already sensational enough. My mother sent a letter through her own attorney. 3 pages, single-spaced, alternating between justification and appeal. The core argument, distilled, Everything they had done was in service of protecting what my grandfather had built, and I had destroyed it by refusing to understand what family required. I read it once. I gave it to Patricia. Then I moved on. The hardest part wasn't any of the legal machinery. It was my father calling me 3 weeks into the investigation, not through his attorney, but directly, late on a Tuesday night, his voice smaller than I had ever heard it. He didn't open with an accusation or a negotiation. He said, "Ryan, I just want to talk to my son." And for a moment, just a moment, something in me wanted to let him. Because the voice on the phone wasn't the man who had stood in my living room watching my wife get handcuffed. It was the man who had taught me to ride a bike in an empty parking lot on a Saturday morning when I was 6 years old. Those two things lived in the same person, and I had to find a way to hold that without it changing anything. "I know," I said. "But you watched her get taken away in handcuffs and you didn't move." "I didn't know what your mother had planned," he said. "But when you saw it," I said quietly. "You did nothing." Silence. "That's the part I can't get past," I told him. "Not what you knew in advance. What you chose in the moment." He didn't answer. I waited long enough to be sure there wasn't an answer coming. "I love you," I said. "And I'll see you in court." The trial for the criminal charges was set for the following spring. My brother's firm dissolved in the interim, 2 partners resigned. The remaining client accounts migrated to a competing firm. The office lease was surrendered. My brother relocated temporarily to my parents' house, which had the quality of a punishment in itself. My mother's attorney attempted a plea arrangement twice. Both times the state attorney declined. The forensic evidence was too complete. The former employee's testimony was too credible. The attempted framing of Camille, documented in the shell company structure itself, made the intentionality undeniable. In the meantime, Camille and I settled into our house. Slowly, quietly, we painted the kitchen the color she had picked in month 1, a deep green that I had initially thought was too bold and now couldn't imagine the room without. We had people over for dinner, real dinners, the kind where no one is performing for anyone else. Derek came with his girlfriend. Camille's sister flew in for a long weekend. We had a kitchen table conversation that went past midnight, and I sat in the middle of it thinking, this is what it was supposed to feel like. One evening in October, Camille came home from her job at the city planning office and found me at the kitchen table reading through the latest court filing. She set her bag down, came up behind me, and rested her chin on my shoulder. "Does it ever feel like too much?" she asked. I thought about it honestly. "No," I said, "because I know what it's for." She was quiet for a moment. "Then I used to feel guilty," she said. "Like somehow I brought this on us by existing too close to them." I turned around. "That's exactly what they wanted you to feel." She nodded. "I know that now." I reached up and took her hand. "You didn't bring this. They built it long before they met you. You were just the person they decided to use when they needed someone." She exhaled slowly. And then she asked the question I had been sitting with myself for months. "Do you think they ever actually saw me as a person?" I thought about that for a long time. Long enough that she started to understand the answer before I said it. "I think they saw you as a variable," I said. "And I think that's a statement about them that has nothing to do with your worth." The criminal trial lasted 9 days. I testified on day 4, not emotionally, not dramatically, just factually. The timeline, the documentation, the sequence of events, Patricia had prepared me well. I answered every question directly and said, "I don't know when I didn't know." On day 6, the former employee testified for 4 hours. Her documentation was methodical and devastating. My brother's attorney tried twice to undermine her credibility, and both times she produced another document. On day 9, the jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. My mother was convicted on 3 counts. My brother on 2. Sentencing was set for 60 days out. The civil case, running parallel, produced a judgment that included full restitution to the trust plus damages. My father, in a development that surprised me less than it probably should have, accepted a consent agreement cooperation in exchange for reduced exposure. He would not serve time, but his financial licenses were permanently revoked. Camille and I were in the courtroom for the verdict. Not in the front rows, not making a statement with our presence just there, quietly, because it felt like something we needed to see completed in person. Walking out of the courthouse, she stopped on the front steps. The afternoon was clear and cold, the kind of October day that feels like it belongs in a different city. "Is it done?" she asked. "The criminal part," I said. "The civil restitution takes longer. But the main thing, yes. It's done." She looked out at the street. "I thought I'd feel something bigger." I nodded. "I know. I had expected something relief, at minimum. What I felt instead was a kind of quietness. The particular stillness of a thing that has been running very loud for a very long time and has finally stopped. We walked to the car together, and she slipped her hand into mine. "I need to ask you something," she said. "Anything," I said. "After everything, do you regret it?" I thought about the question seriously, the way it deserved. I thought about my father's voice on the phone at 11 on a Tuesday night. I thought about the parking lot and the Saturday morning and the bicycle. I thought about my brother standing with his arms crossed in my living room. My mother straightening her blazer. The canapé. "I regret that they made it necessary," I said finally. "I don't regret a single thing I did." She nodded slowly. She seemed satisfied with that. We had one more thing to do that afternoon. Not legal, not formal, just something I'd been carrying for a few months and had been waiting for the right moment. When we got home, I went to the kitchen table and I wrote my parents a letter. Not through Patricia, not as part of any court proceeding. Just a letter. I told them that I had not done what I did out of hatred. I told them that revenge had never been the goal. The goal had been accuracy, correcting something that had been deliberately constructed to be false. I told them that I hoped, when the dust settled and the sentencing was done and the years had passed, they would understand the difference. I didn't expect a response. I wasn't writing it for a response. I was writing it because I didn't want to carry it anymore, not the anger, not the grief, not the complicated residue of loving people who had chosen to be what they were. I sealed it, addressed it, and left it on the counter to mail in the morning. Then I went to find Camille. She was in the backyard, sitting in one of the chairs we'd set up near the garden bed she'd planted in September. The last of the evening light was coming through the gap in the fence, laying a long stripe of gold across the yard. I sat down next to her. She handed me a glass of wine without saying anything. We sat there as the light changed, as the neighborhood got quiet, as the day closed itself down. Somewhere down the street, someone was mowing a lawn. Somewhere above us, a plane crossed slowly west. "They underestimated you," she said after a while. "They underestimated both of us," I said. She considered that. She took a sip of her wine. She had been forged. Technically her name had been put to things she'd never signed, her reputation attached to crimes she'd never committed. And the word, by the end, had flipped entirely. Because in every sense that actually mattered, she was the only real thing in the whole story. "I want to plant tomatoes next year," she said. I laughed. "That's a strong pivot." "I'm serious," she said. "I want to grow something." I looked at the garden bed. At the yard that was ours. At the back of the house we had saved for, that had her name on the deed right next to mine, that no one was ever going to take. "Then we'll plant tomatoes," I said. The sentencing came 63 days later. My mother received 2 years, suspended in part, with full restitution and probation terms. My brother received 18 months, eligible for early release. The civil judgment stood. The trust was restructured under independent management. I wasn't in the courtroom for the sentencing. I had said everything I needed to say on day 4 of the trial. I let Patricia represent our interests and I stayed home. That morning I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee while Camille got ready for work. The house was quiet. The green kitchen walls were catching the light exactly right. I could hear her upstairs moving around, the ordinary sounds of a morning. My phone buzzed. A notification from the court system sentencing entered. I looked at it for a moment. Then I put the phone down and finished my coffee. When Camille came downstairs, she looked at my face and understood without being told. She poured herself a cup, sat across from me. We drank our coffee in the quiet. "That's it," she said. "That's it," I said. She got up a few minutes later, gathered her things, and kissed me on the cheek before heading for the door. "Don't forget," she said, "the tomato seeds are on the counter." I watched her go. I listened to the car back out of the driveway and down the street until the sound faded. Then I got up and picked up the seed packet from the counter. Turned it over in my hands. Simple paper envelope, hand-drawn tomato on the front, planting instructions on the back. There are moments when you understand that the thing you were fighting for was never actually the fight. The fight was just the price of admission. What you were fighting for was the quiet Tuesday morning, the green kitchen, the coffee, the ordinary life no one had any right to take from you. I set the seeds back on the counter. I washed my cup. Then I went outside to start on the garden.